How after 50-100 years of humanity surviving off of bread do we have so many people within the last decade who are entirely allergic to gluten? We don't know. There are a number of theories about this. To clarify, while the increase may be exaggerated by people who falsely claim intolerance when they probably have other health issues or are hypochondriacs, there is actually an increase in people with diagnosable gluten intolerance. And gluten intolerance is different than celiac. I'm taking here about gluten intolerance. Some possible causes include changes in the gut microbiome and changes in how we process and make bread. Changes in the gut microbiome are a likely cause/contributor, but the causes and effects of that are just stating to be understood, and barely. So I won't go into that too much, but if anyone has questions I may be able to answer. On the processing side, one interesting theory is that the germ of wheat helps us process the gluten in some way. It has lots of nutrients, vitamins, fats, etc. Modern wheat flour, even most whole grain stuff, is made by separating the germ from the rest of the wheat first, then processing. This causes the flour to keep longer but removes all those nutrients. This is why flour/cereals need to be fortified. However, we only fortify with the vitamins and minerals for which we notice obvious deficiencies. So it's entirely feasible that we are neglecting to add something back into the flour that helps some people not develop gluten intolerance. This may be via some immune response or due to changes caused in the gut microbe, e.g. we are no longer giving some micronutrients to a specific bacteria in our gut so it dies out. That bacteria helped us process gluten or a byproduct, and without its help we get sick. It's also possible that our body just needs some nutrient in the germ to process gluten efficiently. We really just don't know. TLDR, shit's complicated literally. Edit, first, I know the difference between a theory and hypothesis. I was using the term colloquially, which even scientists do sometimes. People seem to have extrapolated way more than they should have from my comment. Like are asking me where to buy bread with wheat germ and how to fix their gut microbes. That's really not how this works. Anybody who gives you an easy answer to your problems is probably trying to sell you something. I'm looking at you, supplement/probiotics industry. Until relatively recently we didn't even know bacteria could survive in your gut, so expecting the scientific community to have a solid understanding of the gut microbiome now is absurd. These questions span the fields of nutrition, microbial ecology, microbe-host interactions, immunology, and more. I'm sure there are hundreds of plausible explanations, but we are very far away from definitively answering most questions related to the gut microbe. We do know that it affects digestive health, mood, weight, and all kinds of other human physiology. What we don't know is how to bend it to our will or how it causes all of these things. We do know that the answer is complicated. How do different bacteria interact with each other in your gut and then with your body? We also don't know much about that. But we're learning. There is a unique soup of maybe 1,000 species of bacteria in your gut, and they are mostly different than the species that live in mine. We are just starting to learn how specific individual species of bacteria can affect their hosts. But even with this research, we don't think that it will be the same in everyone. Example, maybe bacteria A has effect B on me, but it has effect C on you, because I have bacteria Q in my gut and you don't, and bacteria Q is necessary for effect B. Now consider that X 1,000 species, and that a genetic component also affects this, and diet and stress levels and fitness also affect this. See where I'm going? We do know that the gut microbe is influenced by stress, diet, sleep, environmental exposure, your parents, exercise, infection, travel, antibiotics, alcohol consumption, genetics, epigenetics, which is affected by all of these things and more, social habits, sun exposure, etc. Just to name a few. The extent to which these affect each person is probably highly variable. So asking about specific solutions or a quick fix is a waste of time, especially on the internet. And if you have a shitty diet, especially one high in carbs and sugar, or high stress levels, or you drink a lot, addressing those first is probably a smarter solution than asking about wheat germ and special bread and probiotics. May work in some cases for some people sometimes, and usually not as a fix, but as a supplement. It's just not well studied enough, and GMOs, no evidence of them affecting any of this or even a feasible mechanism for how they would. TLDR2, no really shit's complicated. Something that works for one person may not for another for hundreds of reasons that we don't know much about yet, but are sort of on the verge of understanding. This is also why the human microbiome is so hard to study. Remember, none of this is well researched enough for there to be standardized advice for anybody outside of the normal, live a healthy lifestyle advice and slowly figuring out what makes you feel better. So don't ask for a quick fix and don't trust anyone who offers one. Here are some links about the microbiome and a couple on the microbiome and gluten. There's a great Netflix 4-part documentary called Cooked that delves into this. The documentary series' 4 parts were titled Earth, Air, Fire and Water, and it looked at an anthropological history of our diets and hunting/eating/cooking rituals. The Air episode was all about bread, and about how it has been a staple of our diets for so long. Their postulate was that for the vast majority of people, gluten isn't the issue. Sure, there are some people for whom the gluten is the problem, they just assume it is because modern bread doesn't agree with them because of the accelerated processes they use to make it. Or perhaps there used to be something in bread that prevented gluten from having such an adverse reaction. It used to be that bread was fermented. The dough was a living, breathing colony. In more recent years, to speed up the bread-making process, instead of allowing the natural bacteria in the water supply to thrive in the wheat and change it, they instead use clean additives, such as yeast. Due to this, there are various nutrients that used to be in bread that aren't anymore, so manufacturers have also added fortifications in also, to make up for those that were missing and actually have it be nutritious. TLDR, the bread we eat now isn't really anything like the bread our bodies evolved with. Just so we're clear, allergy to gluten is a thing, but is different from celiac disease. Both are well-defined and different from gluten intolerance, which is less clear. The most common explanation for increased allergies is the hygiene hypothesis. The idea is that aggressive modern hygiene removes the parasites and bacteria that help calibrate the immune system, leaving it more likely to react to harmless targets. It's also been suggested that modern wheat could be more allergenic. The crossbreeding of new wheat strains in the 1960s, which allowed us to feed billions of people, could have selected for a protein variant that immune systems just don't like. Modern wheat processing has also been noted as a potential contributor. A little off topic, one thing I read a long time ago in Nature before the anti-gluten trend we're seeing. It was an article about fiber in our modern Western diets. And how we lack a lot of fiber in our diets and how the lack of fiber causes the lower intestines to not be healthy, getting swollen and inflamed. When the lower intestines get to this stage, gluten can and has been shown to pass through the walls into the bloodstream. At that point, once past the barrier, problems occur. It was a good read and I'm sure I'm paraphrasing it way wrong, but what I took from it, because our diets are bad in one way it's causing other problems to appear. And you didn't have to have an allergy or celiacs to see some of the problems appearing. Note, I think this is very different than the trend we are seeing today where everybody is afraid of the glutens. I'd love to find that old magazine or online version to reread it and see how relevant it is.